Welcome to the Deep Dive on the Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir, along with Ben Golliver. And Ben, it's been a long time. It seems like forever since I've talked to you, and it really hasn't been that long, but I think a lot of it's exaggerated by how much is happening in the basketball world.
Yeah, long in basketball years, right? We probably had Game 7 since we last spoke, the NBA draft since we last spoke, free agency since we last spoke. I bet Kevin Durant got traded since we last spoke. It's only been a couple weeks, so clearly we got a lot to dig into. This is going to be a very deep dive, right?
It really is. This is dog years. You know, like we've got okay, well, let's start with the Summer League. You finally get a bit of a reprieve from all your travels, but you're going to be heading down to out to Las Vegas rather for the NBA Summer League. And, you know, like 10 years ago, Ben, or 15 years ago, the Summer League was this little outpost of basketball in the summer. It's a big, big deal now. And I can't even imagine what the atmosphere is going to be like this summer, if for no other reason that Cooper Flagg's showing up, but then there are all of these other subplots as well.
Oh, no question. I mean, to me, the Summer League always has a spot near and dear to my heart because I think as a young reporter who really had no credentials whatsoever, it's one of the few events that you could actually kind of go to and get some experience. And so you really relate to the young players who are coming in 18, 19 years old. Sometimes they're fighting for jobs. Sometimes they're a number one pick like Cooper Flagg, who's just trying to establish himself and, you know, kind of create a good first impression for millions of fans around the world. So I've loved Summer League going all the way back. I think my first one might have been 2008. And, you know, back then they would never, not a lot of sellouts, it was very sparse crowds. They used to bus local school children in and just tell all the kids, scream real loud. And so they weren't even watching the game. They weren't cheering for like dunks or blocks or anything like that. They were just shouting and screaming in the background. So they've come a long way from the seat fillers. And now they've got, in a lot of these games, they'll be selling out UNLV's gym. It'll be a packed house. A couple of years ago for Victor Wembanyama, his first game, it was standing room only. I mean, you could barely breathe. There were so many people packed in that gym. So I'm very much looking forward to it. And it's an interesting draft class. I mean, Cooper Flagg gets all the headlines, deservedly so. Prodigy from Maine, 18 years old, number one pick, hopping onto a Dallas team that's very veteran dominated. I think he's going to show people how NBA ready he truly is when he gets out there in Summer League. But you got the Spurs with 2 lottery picks, and they're trying to build something special around Wembanyama. So how ready are those guys to compete from day one? And then also, I think one of the bigger storylines would be Ace Bailey in Utah. All this drama on draft night. Does he want to go there? Is he trying to force his way to a different team? He take the first flight to Utah. And so people are wondering, is there going to be a holdout? Obviously, all that drama kind of got put to the side. Cooler heads prevailed. He showed up and said all the right things in Utah. But I'll tell you what, he put a big target on his back. A lot of casual fans know who this guy is because they're starting to think about, Eli Manning didn't want to play with the Chargers years and years ago in the NFL and some of these other notable holdouts. And so I think for Ace Bailey, he goes to Summer League with a lot of pressure. He's got to step up and do it and show why he was worthy of a top 5 pick because otherwise I think there's going to be a lot of backlash to how he handled the things during the pre-draft process.
You make a great point, and it did. What surprises me was it was a tidal wave of coverage and discussion. It's kind of been pushed to the background. Now it's going to be brought to the foreground again because now he's going to be on display for trying to make his mark not just in the NBA, but for a team, Utah, that the state of Utah is polarizing in and of itself. It's a team that really has been struggling, and he's such a key piece now to what they hope will be a good rebuild. But in your opinion, Ben, how good is Ace Bailey? How NBA ready do you think he might be?
He's not my favorite prospect from this draft. I'll just be honest. I think people view him as having star potential because he's an alpha scorer. He's really looking to, hit tough jump shots, create off the dribble for himself, and try to score in volume. And that's a valuable piece. And in Utah, I mean, they have a Lowry Markkanen, but it feels to me like he could be a trade chip at any moment, right? Like as they continue through this rebuild. So there's a chance, Ace Bailey's kind of like the lead guy on your offense if you fast forward a couple of years. But the decision making is a real question mark to me at this point of his career. The maturity is an obvious question mark. He's canceling draft workouts and declining draft workouts with different teams. That's just not how it goes. I mean, being in New York for the draft media day, you've got Cooper Flagg coming in. I mean, he's like 18 years old going on 35. He's got all, very thoughtful answers. He's incredibly well prepared. Nothing's catching him by surprise. There's going to be a lot of questions about Luka Doncic. He handled those brilliantly. He was just ready to go. And then you have Ace Bailey, who's getting asked about all these draft workouts that he canceled. He doesn't have a single thing he can say. He's trying to say, I just want to keep it about basketball. And of course, the Philadelphia media, who was interested in him with the number 3 pick, is saying, well, isn't a basketball workout basketball? Like, why can't we talk about that? And he just had no answers. He looked totally overwhelmed, and he kind of looked like he got, thrown out there unprepared. So if that's the same feeling when he's on the court at Summer League, I think there's going to be some red flags and some alarms going off and saying, wait a minute, is this guy more of a project than people were expecting? Because don't forget, at Rutgers, they had a losing record and didn't make the NCAA tournament, right? And they had both him and the number 2 pick, Dylan Harper. So I think there's some real questions. How much can he contribute to winning? How ready for the NBA spotlight and NBA defenders is he? And I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some guys on other teams going out there trying to attack him, trying to really test him and see what he's made of.
It's interesting, Ben, because you hit on a key point of the NBA draft, in that I'm still amazed today how much of the draft consideration is about potential, quote unquote potential, as opposed to proven maturity and more of an NBA ready, proven older player. But it's still like a moth to light in the NBA of NBA executives cannot resist this thing called potential.
Well, it's hard to blame him. I mean, if you had a Tim Duncan who went for 4 years and it was a no-brainer pick, right, everybody would take him, right? But exactly, that's just not how college basketball works. We are seeing a little bit of a shift, though, and it's not at the top of the order, because you're right. I mean, the one-and-done guys are going to dominate the top part of the lottery, them and the international players, right? Right. We're seeing a couple of trends, though. We're seeing international players come play NCAA basketball and then go pro. So it makes it a little bit more of an apples-to-apples comparison for some of those guys, and that's been an interesting development, and I actually think it's helpful for NBA scouts, because instead of trying to wonder, well, how is this guy going to translate from like the second German league or the Spanish league, it's like, okay, well, he played Big Ten basketball, so we can kind of compare him to other prospects, and it makes it a little bit easier that way. But the other trend we're seeing is guys are staying in college longer because of NIL. If you're not a top 10 pick, you're not a top 20 pick, maybe you're a fringe first-round player, instead of taking the money and running and going to the NBA and getting drafted just anywhere that will take you so you can get a paycheck, these guys are staying a little bit longer, and I think it winds up creating more NBA-ready players. I know the teams are happy about that, because imagine you're picking number 25. You just want a guy you can plug into your rotation and compete for a championship next year. Well, if you have more upperclassmen available to you, that's the exact kind of player you want to take late in the first round. So it is shifting back a little bit to some more proven players in the draft, but you're right. At the top, it's always going to be about potential. I mean, you go right down the list from the top of the board, it's a whole bunch of guys who can barely grow a beard or barely grow a mustache.
Yep, and get carded every bar they go near. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely you're absolutely right. And I'm talking to Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Deep Dive on the basketball show. Ben, one final thing on the draft as you head into the Summer League. Cooper Flagg, obviously. We talk about the Rutgers guys. Are there one or two dark horse players out there that you're really curious to watch and see how far along they are and how NBA ready they might be?
Well, I think I mentioned the San Antonio Spurs guys as being, guys to watch. Now, obviously, the number 2 pick, that's not really a dark horse. But, their other draft pick they took late in the lottery, 14th pick, Carter Bryant from Arizona, he didn't have a huge role at Arizona. But what they're trying to draft him into is that classic Spurs role of hey, no usage, right? We don't really want you to score a bunch. We want you to do a lot of the dirty work. We want you to be a complementary offensive player. We want you to just kind of fit in, because what San Antonio is juggling right now is this idea that they got 3 guards who all want the ball, with Steph Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and now Dylan Harper. They also have Vassell, and he only can play with the ball. He's not much of a passer. So you have a lot of guys and only one basketball. And Wemby's going to be their number 1 option no matter what. So you need the glue guy role players. And so Carter Bryant for San Antonio is a guy I'm going to really be watching late in the lottery. I just want to see, can he be a contributor this year? Because, time flies. We're into year 3 for Wemby right now.
Right. And
typically year 3 for these big time players is when you're supposed to start really winning. You don't have to go to the championship. You don't have to go to the finals, but we want to see you make the playoffs, right? Maybe even surprise some people and win a series, right? And so San Antonio also went and grabbed Luke Cornett as a backup center. Maybe they could do a little bit of a Twin Towers look with him and Wemby. Just to take some of that load off of Wembanyama and to ensure that they have a good defensive backbone, even when Wemby is not on the court. So San Antonio is trying to improve. They're trying to take a step forward this year. They're trying to get the right pieces around Wembanyama, and I think one of those really key pieces is going to be Carter Bryant. And it's possible he's ready to go out of the gate, and it's possible maybe it takes a year or two, but you're going to need those kinds of guys to complement the star players on San Antonio.
Well, and I think too, Ben, you hit on a key element there. I don't have the numbers or the stats or anything, but there certainly were selections of role players that I thought were more apparent in the 2 rounds of the draft. And there are some undrafted players that would fit that category as well, that could slide in, I think, to some lineups and fulfill a role, because I think OKC and Indiana both demonstrated the need for your stars, but the need for guys to do the dirty work too.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, we go all day long if we're just listening to guys who are willing to do the dirty work on the Pacers and the Thunder. It was a shared ethos that made that finals so fun. It's part of the reason why it went 7, right? There was somebody different stepping up every single game, and no one let go of the rope all the way till the very end. So, I think that's true. There's a little bit of a copycat syndrome there in terms of what people are targeting. Another name that I want to bring up, actually maybe 2 names I think are going to get some attention at Summer League. The Blazers drafted a Chinese center, Young Hansen, and they decided almost immediately afterwards to buy out DeAndre Ayton. And I think DeAndre Ayton was just a very poor leader in Portland. He was a part of this group with Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant, guys who just were completely under-delivering on their contracts and wind up, really being overpaid and not setting a winning tone for that organization. So the Blazers are trying to really double down on hard-playing players, and have a better culture. So they go out and grab Drew Holiday to kind of be the tone setter, from Boston. And they're really going to highlight Toumani Camara and Denny Avdia, again, hard-playing players. And they draft Young Hansen into this mix, and they're really going to play him a lot. It sounds like him and last year's lottery pick, Donovan Clingan. And so Young, he's got some nifty footwork. He's got some pump fake moves. He's got some post skills. He's not afraid to, put the ball on the ground a little bit. It all looks good in international videos, right? And he's a big guy. He's a 7-footer. He's 20 years old, baby faced. So I think there's going to be a lot of attention and interest in him. Just is he really ready to be a player this year? Or is Portland maybe going to regret how quickly they moved on from DeAndre Ayton because, they're maybe too young inside and they take a step back? I think that's one thing I'm going to be looking at for Summer League. And the last one would be Derek Queen with the Pelicans. Yes. And he's an interesting player, undersized big guy, skilled scorer, right? But typically that type of player is kind of like a 6-man. He's a bench type guy in the NBA. He's not like a go-to guy you'd build your offense around. It's a weird fit fit with him and Zion Williamson in New Orleans, because neither one of them is shooters. Both of them are kind of scorers with the ball in their hands. So how is that going to work together? But the real reason there's going to be so much interest in Derek Queen is because the Pelicans traded an unprotected pick next year to move up 10 spots to draft him, with the Atlanta Hawks pick, the number 13 pick. And so that, even though the Pelicans probably didn't intend it this way, that is going to put a ton of pressure on Derek Queen from day one. He's not the typical 13th pick where you just kind of, whatever you get, you're happy with in year one. He's really going to have to be a player, because it's possible that pick they give to Atlanta, the Pelicans have to give up. That could be a top 5 pick next year. That could be AJ DeBanza or Cam Boozers, guys who are really viewed as franchise level players. And so he's another guy, I think, sort of in a different way from an Ace Bailey, but he's going to be a guy who gets a lot of scrutiny this summer.
The two franchises that I felt were hit the hardest with scrutiny, that's a perfect word, was New Orleans for that move, and the way that the Brooklyn Nets drafted.
Yeah.
That was just such a peculiar approach that they took, that they didn't try to do any kind of trading, that they just went ahead. They're kind of, getting players out of there, and they're bringing all this youth in. But boy, there is, I think, not a real danger. There always is a danger of being too young in the NBA, and Brooklyn, with all of their struggles over the years, certainly seemed to be going in that direction.
Well, the funniest thing about the Nets draft, you know what it reminds me of? Have you ever had a friend who's like a couch potato, but then, maybe it's New Year's resolution. They decide, hey, I'm going to get in shape. So they start working
out. They go out by a treadmill and wait.
Yeah, it's treadmill, weight. They're swimming at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like they're preparing for a triathlon, right? Like they just overcompensate and overdo it. And that's the Brooklyn Nets. If you go back throughout the Brooklyn Nets history, there's been multiple times they've traded like 5 years of their first round picks for different trades, right? There's full years where they're not getting any, like decades where they're almost not getting any impact players in the draft. And then this year they decided to become the first team in NBA history to select 5 first round picks and use all of them. It was crazy to see that. And there was actually a lot of overlap in terms of the positions as well, where they had a lot of guards. And they already have some guards in place, although they did lose D'Angelo Russell. So, I always joke with my friend, going to training camp with the Brooklyn Nets, it's sort of going to be like basic training with the military, where the drill sergeant says, hey, look to your left, look to your right. One of those guys isn't going to make it through this. That's how it's going to be, because you can't have 3, 4, 5 new guards on the same NBA team. It just doesn't work that way. Someone's going to have to win that job, and someone's going to wind up being a loser. And, rarely do you see first round picks kind of treated that way. Usually you get some real runway to operate. And I feel like with Brooklyn, there's just not going to be enough opportunity for everyone. I do think the good part of their strategy, though, this is a really good year to tank, because there's 3 guys already that people are talking about as franchise level players next year. So this is a really good year to be really, really bad. And I think that's Brooklyn's plan.
Looks like it, and I think there'll be another race to the bottom next year, because you're right. There is a lot of talk about guys that can really step in and be impact players coming up in the 2026 draft. And I'm talking to Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Deep Dive on the Basketball Show. I think let's start diving into free agency. Ben, I want to start in your neck of the woods, and that's L.A. The signing of Ayton as the post player, layering in the drama of the cryptic messaging of LeBron James. What is your sense about the ebbs and flows and the tides and currents going on right now with new ownership and these player moves in Los Angeles with the very, the Lakers that are held in such high esteem with such a rich history, and it's, starting to look like there's a new pathway forward that's beyond just LeBron.
Well, I was surprised with how the Lakers handled the LeBron situation because for years, LeBron has always just gotten the extension. They give him a player option for the next year. And that way, he gets some real money and he gets a little bit of job security, right? And This year, the Lakers said, no, we're not going to give you any extra years. We're not giving you any extra money. You're actually going to come into next season as an expiring contract. You could pick up your option for $53 million, but we're not going to give you a penny more. I think that's where the statements, the cryptic stuff that you're talking about for LeBron, I think that's where that originates. I think many star players would view that almost as a sign of disrespect. This idea that, you can just pick up your player option and we're not going to really have a conversation about anything beyond that. And especially because LeBron, when he got to the Lakers, they were horrible. He led them to a championship. He's made them really restored their glory. And they just, had this franchise sale at a valuation of $10 billion. LeBron's been a big part of that, in terms of the rise of the franchise value here over the last 7-8 years. So I could understand why he would feel a little bit, miffed by it. Now, he hasn't said that. That's just my speculation, but it certainly feels that way. But can you blame the Lakers? He's 40 years old. The fit with Luka was good, but it wasn't great. The Lakers got run off the court in the playoffs by a team that got run off the court by the Thunder. So that tells you there are 2 degrees of separation from really being contenders, right? And they have some major holes to fill, and they didn't have enough avenues to fill all of them, right? They go out and grab Ayton as their starting center because that's their biggest need, but then they lose Dorian Finney-Smith, who was one of their best wing forwards. Well, now that creates a major need that they were not able to fill. So I think that they actually wind up as losers of free agency. I think they took a step back. Dorian Finney-Smith was a really good fit with Luka, and he had earned the trust of the coaching staff with his 3-and-D profile. With Ayton, the concerns, the knocks have been there all the way since the pre-draft process. Does he love basketball? Is he committed? Is it just a job to him? Is he willing to try to fulfill his potential? Can he do it every single night? How does he respond to criticism and coaching? These have just been constant questions about him throughout his NBA career. And it's just a massive red flag when a number 1 pick in the middle of his prime gets bought out by a losing team like the Portland Trailblazers. They just paid him to go home. They said, we don't even want you here. And so, guys like Ben Simmons, they really get hit hard with the draft bust label, right? Because, his career fell to pieces and he can't even play anymore. And fair enough, but it's just a different flavor. At least Ben Simmons made an all-star team. At least he made some all-defense teams. Ayton hasn't done any of those things as a number 1 pick in the same draft with guys like Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson Jr., Trae Young. That was a great draft. Ayton was the number 1 guy. And to me, he's just been a bust. I know he gets some box score numbers, but don't be fooled. He's not a big-time impact player. And I think when you look at his fit with Luka, you want a guy who can dive to the rim and, get the lob dunks. He can finish occasional lob dunks, but Ayton's favorite thing to do on offense is to just sit at the free throw line and take target practice jumpers, mid-range jumpers, the kinds of shots that every team, if they're looking at LeBron and Luka out there, they're saying, hey, DeAndre, have as many of those as you want. You can take 20 of them tonight. We're not even going to guard you, right? Because it's such an inefficient option compared to the rest of the stuff that the Lakers have going on. So I don't like the fit. I'm not sure he's going to be happy with the level of touches he gets because the Lakers have 3 pretty high usage perimeter players who do most of the scoring. And I think there's going to be a lot of frustration when the Lakers players realize, hey, this guy's not that good on defense. He's kind of forgetful. He has lapses in attention. He's not as good as he looks physically. he's got a very impressive body and a lot of length and jumping ability, but he just doesn't put it to full use. So I think, Ayton, you can slide under the radar with the Phoenix Suns a little bit. You can slide under the radar with the Blazers, but you cannot slide under the radar with the Lakers. And I could see this thing being pretty explosive if it doesn't go well.
Just as I spoke about with Pat Boylan, you can listen to the entire interview with Ben Golliver on our podcast, which we will post by the end of our program today. We're going to take a break right now, and Ryan and I will come back with closing time here on the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440. Welcome back to the basketball show as we are in closing time down the stretch run here. And Ryan, let's go over our poll numbers.
Who in the West can displace the Thunder? We gave the options Rockets, Thunder, Timberwolves, and Lakers, and there was a tie for first place with the Rockets and Timberwolves. They both split. They both have 2/3 of the vote combined. So people think KD and the Rockets and Anthony Edwards and your guys in Minnesota can take down. And then the Nuggets were second. The Lakers were last place.
Interesting. I thought it would have been the Denver Nuggets. I do like the moves the Nuggets made.
Well, Jonas Valanciunas left.
Did he sign his EuroLeague deal?
Yeah.
Well, he probably get the same money. And
I think it's actually a little less, but you're living in Greece and not Colorado.
Well, yeah, I mean, neither sound too bad. But on the other hand, Jonas has been a doormat, and I don't think deservedly so. So I can see
he was a good backup in Sacramento. I thought he did an okay job.
I like Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah.
I liked him.
He's a play-in legend. He's in the play-in every year.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I like Valanciunas. I always thought he was shortchanged in Toronto. I thought he was a guy.
What was he? 4th overall, 3rd overall in the draft? Like,
yeah.
He was 5th overall. He was a top 5 pick.
Top 5 pick, and he's no Jokic, but you never know. But he was a serviceable big. One of the most heavily criticized signings in this season is the Jakob Poeltl re-signing for the money that the Raptors are giving him through age 34. I was reading some of the grades of by various sports writers, and that received the lowest grade of any of the re-signings that have taken place.
He's good, but he's not like, 4 years from now, he's going to be our starter center good.
No, and I like, especially in the screen and roll, like when he goes downhill, he's got great hands, and he finishes really well around the basket.
Great rebounder as well.
Yeah, he is. He's
underrated playmaker.
But he could not hit a three if you locked him in the gym for a week. Yeah. So, I mean, he is not that kind of modern center. And to pay him big bucks, on the other hand, you lock him up. And you don't have to think about that, and you worry about all of the other positional developments. And you know he's going to be a good team player. So he does, I guess, fill a need. But I find it interesting. In the West has definitely made it interesting. The T-Wolves, with their re-signings, continuing to build around Ant, but keeping Naz Reid and Randall.
They lost Nikhil.
They did, but he's replaceable by some of the guys they already have on the bench. And for what they would have had to pay him, I don't blame them. Because
he got 4 years, $62 million.
And you know what? He did a great service to his own career. He was a big contributor to the T-Wolves, but they have some young talent that I think will be every bit as good as he probably will be. But Denver, I like what they did by getting rid of Michael Porter Jr. That's addition by subtraction. But bringing in Bruce Brown again, I thought they had Valanciunas. That would have been a nice backup. So the Nuggets are going to have to go back to the drawing board.
It does open up their full mid-level exception. If that's any consolation. So they didn't just do JV assault. That would make sense. Like, we can take care of your deal. No. JV gave up the deal to go. So they do good under the luxury tax, and the second apron. Sorry. So they do have access to another deal if they want, which could be nice.
And you know what's really cool, Ryan? You have mastered the language and the thought process around the different levels of the salary cap.
That's what happens when you play 2K like all the time as a kid.
Yeah.
Like I grew up playing like the My League, where it's like you manage teams and you figure out the contracts. There was a time when I was like 18, 19 where I knew everyone's contract. I knew everyone's contract.
You're such a nerd. So
thanks.
No, that's great. That is great. And it's such a complicated arena that everybody has to play in. So before we run out of time, we do need to touch on the Milwaukee Bucks, because the Bucks are desperate to keep Antetokounmpo happy. Apparently they've gone out. They've acquired Myles Turner, who I think will be a nice compliment.
4-year, $107 million deal.
I don't think he's worth it, but hey,
it's $3 million more than the Pacers said they'd pay for a max. So it's a little bit like you didn't want to pay him an extra $3 million, but
it seems strange. But I think also Turner looks like he wants to have a new start. But the most controversial aspect of what the Bucks did was the flat-out release of Damian Lillard.
$22.5 million a year he is owed for the next 5 years. What they do with buyouts, what the rule is, if you times their current deal years by 2, and then you add 1 year, and that's how long you have to pay the rest of the contract out. For example, let's say I'll do smaller numbers. Let's say you got $100 over 2 years. It's smaller numbers, but you times it by 2 and add 1, so it'd be 5 years, and it'd be $20 million for each year to make up that money. So that's Damian Lillard had 2 years left on his contract, and instead they did the rule where you could waive and stretch, where you times the years by 2 and add 1 year, and they're paying him that 22.5 over those 5 years. So speaking of nerd, I guess.
But that's great, and thank you for explaining that, because I think it's important.
It's happened before. Do you remember Joakim Noah with the Knicks?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they did the same thing where it's like they just save a little money, but it's crazy. I'll take $22.5 million just to chill.
That's a nice unemployment check. Yeah. That's not bad. And by the way, what sport did Noah's dad play?
I'm not sure. What's
tennis?
Okay.
Tennis, yeah. Yannick Noah was a great French tennis player, won the French Open, so he's a national hero.
C'est bon.
So, but the Bucks are interesting because there's still this, I think, undercurrent that Giannis wants to move, and that they're still trying to find a way to keep him. So I'm curious what they're going to be able to do. Now, they're better with Turner, but are they going to be putting Giannis in the situation where he's got to be the point center?
Well, I saw a thing that said he was very upset with the move, and it kind of makes sense. Like, you don't have Damian Lillard next year, but he's a better player than Myles Turner. But then I saw another report that said Damian Lillard was happy, and it's hard not to see why. He gets 22.5 to hang out at home and then pick his next team for more extra money.
Yeah, exactly. Now, isn't there some provision in there where they blend it with a new contract?
No, not for a waiver. If they buy them out, yes, because typically with for example, DeAndre Ayton, they typically, what they do with a buyout is when you buy someone out, they take the money, what your expected money in your next deal is, they take that out of your current contract. So when you get your new contract, you just make what you would have. With the waiver, just waiving them, they just own the money straight up.
So he's guaranteed that money for 5 years.
He's guaranteed 22.5 for the next 5 years, and you'll get whatever. He won't probably sign an incredibly lucrative next deal. I can imagine maybe 2 years, 20 mil, or 3 years, 35 mil, that kind of thing, just because he has so much money waiting for him.
Yep.
He can afford to just...
So he can go to the team he wants to go to try...
For whatever amount of money. Most likely to try to win a championship. Yeah, and it's likely going to be not a max deal. Like, there's no way teams that are trying to compete for a ring have a max deal anyway. So,
and I mean, besides his injury, besides the length of time for his recovery, he's also mid-30s. So... on top of, similar to Klay Thompson, he's in the same age range as Klay when he's coming back. And you don't expect Damian Lillard is ever going to be the player he once was.
No, but you don't need him to be the player he once was from a lot of teams. Just be like a guard that can shoot and somewhat stay alive on defense.
If he can be 50 to 75% or 75% of what he was, that would be a great addition.
Especially for a $14-15 million a year deal.
Yeah, it would be great. Well, this has been a great show. Thank you. We always come to this point in the show where I share the memory of the loss of our son, Ben, well over 2 years ago now, as hard as that is to believe. And in the background is his music, a song that he wrote and performed in tribute to his friend David Finkelman, who also passed away. And for people who have suffered loss, we understand your pain and wish you blessings in terms of your ability to deal with it. And to all people, one of the things Ben was very kind and very thoughtful, especially about people who are marginalized. And he walked the walk in his life. And I would urge us all to do the same, to be kind to each other. We have no idea what people are going through in their lives. So please think the best of others and be kind to others. Have a great week on and off the court. Ryan, thank you very much for today. Great show.
I will not be shirtless next week. I've decided I'll have a shirt.
Thank goodness for that. And to all of you, thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. You can listen to our podcasts on any of your podcast providers. We have the full editions of the Pat Boylan and the Ben Golliver. And also, we're going to break out the interview with Steve Sir. I think that's really worth listening to, because I think you get a real insight in what it takes, not just to coach 3x3, but to coach in general. So on behalf of Ryan, myself, and the team here at Sports 1440, have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on The Basketball Show.